My name is Christy Busby, and you are about to listen to the next episode of my podcast called F.A.T.E, From Atheism to Enlightenment. So come on in, join me. We're going to talk about it all, from atheism to enlightenment. Alrighty, guys, here we go. Get ready, and welcome to your fate. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of F.A.T.E. How's everybody doing out there? On today's show, I have Fotula Foteini Adrimi. She is a spiritual teacher of ancient Egyptian mysteries and shamanism. She is here to share all of her thoughts on her latest book called Sacred Mysticism of Egypt. This is going to be a fascinating show, folks. Fotula, welcome to your F.A.T.E, my friend. How are you doing today?
Hi, Christy, and hello to everybody listening. I'm very honored to be here. I'm so excited to be here and to share my book and my work. And also, this is something that I have been experiencing even from childhood, the love of ancient Egypt and the mystery schools. So it's a wonderful opportunity for me to share what I really love. And I think some people may find it fascinating.
Well, one of those people was this I did. I read your book and it resonated with me on so many levels. I have so many questions and I'm super excited to bring this information to my audience as well. Ancient times, the pyramids, all of those mystical things, mysterious things that people still speak about today. You give such a new perspective, new insights on what you really can learn from these times. But first, I always like to start at the very beginning. I'd love to introduce you to the audience and discuss your own spiritual journey, your gifts, and how we got here today.
So, my spiritual journey started a long time ago. Since I was a child, I was very open, I was very clairvoyant, and I had visions of ancient Egypt. But everything really accelerated when I became 30. At the age of 30, something really happened, and I started to remember my lifetimes in Egypt, and life itself brought me onto my spiritual path. And there was like no escape of that. I went to Egypt. I found the right teachers who could help me. I found shamanism, which is part of my ancestral work, and my ancestors practiced that art, but I found it through Western teachers, because in Greece, where I come from, this path in my lineage was not open to women. And I met it in the West through Sandra Ingerman and other wonderful teachers, indigenous people as well, from the Himalayas, from America as well, Native Americans, and I was introduced to this beautiful path. I trained with them. I became a teacher of shamanism with Sandra Ingerman, and after all that, I went back to my lineage and I said, could I have also my own, what is in my bones? And the elders took 2 years, because they said it's unlucky for a woman to do this. That is the tradition. But so in my family there were no men left, only my father. And I had no brothers, so I said, if you do not give it to me, I'm practicing anyway, and it will be lost, as we have lost so much of that old wisdom. So
Yes, yes.
my path has been a very interesting one, because I look back at my life and I think, how on earth this little girl from provincial Greece ended up in Scotland teaching the ancient Egyptian mysteries that I remembered from a past life. And I've done so much work. Honestly, I've done so much work. I have folders and folders of teachings that my helping spirit, the goddess Isis, gave to me, and she explained things to me. And she told me, do not read what other people say, because then your mind will be muddled and you will not know what you're channeling, what is coming from somebody else. Just focus on bringing this information in as pure way as you can, and share it with others from the heart. So I have been doing that. And since 2006, almost 20 years, I have been working on this sharing these teachings with other people, and just seeing the beauty of the ancient world meeting us again.
Yes. I my first my impression of reading the book, it really resonated with me on so many levels, as far as, and ladies and gentlemen, there's lots of words in this book that are going to be hard for me to pronounce, and so I'm going to need a little help. But you talk about a place, the golden times of ancient Egyptian, Zep-Tepi, and how they lived, and what spirituality was at the forefront of how everyone lived. So it really was like, wow, this it resonated with me a lot. Number one, I just want to say it was interesting to me that you started having experiences with your gifts at very young, and you were told that because you were a girl that you couldn't say the things that you were saying. And I've never, as a woman, experienced anybody telling me that I couldn't do something because I was a girl. In fact, my dad was the exact opposite. He basically treated me like a son and like let me do everything that boys did. So it broke my heart that you are such a gifted, spiritually powerful person, and that you could have had a completely different path had you not pursued it regardless. So my hat's off to you. And I want to tell all these young women out here that no matter what anybody tells you, you're just as good as men, man. Don't let any man tell you you can't do something out there. I'm telling you, that is like, anyways, that just, it made me mad. So I wanted to say it on the show. Uh,
It was painful for me at the time as well when I was told that. It was very painful. And what I did was to pray to my ancestral spirits who joined me, who was one of the first names that just came out of my mouth when I started on my path, was the goddess of the underworld, Hekate. See, or Hekate, that you probably know as Hekate, but we call her Hekate. And I prayed to her and said, can you help me? And she said, wait and keep faith. And then after 2 years, when things started changing, and the elders realized that yes, I was serious and I was definitely going to do it, and I was doing it anyway. And then there was also so many signs. There were so many signs that could not be ignored anymore. So yes, eventually it took all this time until 2015 that the elders said, yes, we are going to share with you this
wow.
tradition.
Well, I'm glad it all worked out, but wow, wow. Let's before I get into the Egyptian stuff, I just want to talk a little bit about your gifts and what are they and how you experience them. Are you somebody that hears things? Do you see things? Do you like what are your gifts actually? How do you experience them? How do they come to you?
So, this is a very interesting question. So, in the beginning, I was very psychic. I'm still clairvoyant, so I can see things a bit like sometimes in my mind's eye. But there were instances, not many, that the spirits manifested in front of me, and I saw them with my eyes open. So it was like, and I was so surprised that nobody else could see them because they were so vivid. And I saw the goddess Isis as she appears in the hieroglyphics with the wings, one wing up, one wing straight ahead. And she was there hovering in a bright blue color. And I was thinking, there she is, and I could see her with my eyes. But that is rare because it takes so much time and effort and energy for the spirits. They have to use the etheric energy of the earth to manifest in that way. So most of the time I have images in my head. I hear the words very clearly. So sometimes I hear and I feel the energy as well. So I hear, let's say, the voice of Isis, and it comes with quite a strong energy. It doesn't come, you feel the love as well, but most of the time it's like a force. You really feel that force directing you, what needs to happen, what you need to do. And other times I really feel this energy around me, and I just know she's there, or a spirit is there, and I investigate what is this spirit. So I hear, I feel, I see, and sometimes I hear also the voice of spirit that is different with my physical ears, not just with my psychic ears, but again, that's more rare.
Wow, that is incredible. I mean, you what a life. Um, all right, we'll get more into that later, but let's talk about who Iset is, and is it Iset or Isis? Iset,
Iset.
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 Let's talk about who Iset is and how she came into your life and got you kind of on your path.
Yes, so Iset is the Egyptian goddess we call in English Isis. We call her Isis, but that is an anglified form of the Greek word Isis. So when the Greeks, the Ptolemies, we call them, the Greeks conquered Egypt after Alexander the Great, then what happened was that they gave Greek names, or took the names and gave them Greek endings. So the original name from ancient Egypt is Iset, and she has a few qualities. I'll try and describe her. Is that she is the goddess of unconditional love, so she holds the energy of Divine Mother. She's the path opener through the initiation that is called Heka. So she's described as the mistress of Heka, the one who puts us on our spiritual path for our soul to evolve, to find our path back to our divine self, and sees it there for a teacher. And I feel that all these Egyptian Neteru, or gods and goddesses as we call them now, they are teachers. They have so much to show us. And what we're doing with Iset is to practice spiritual teachings of very high vibrational energy. And the energy is coming from the Sirius star, the brightest star on the night sky. So the ancient Egyptians said Iset is the bringing to us this light of Sirius, and they called her Iset of Sirius, of the Sirius star.
It's amazing. When we talk about ancient Egyptian times and things of that nature, we kind of have to start where it really began, which is what we call Atlantis. A lot of people think Atlantis was a myth and that it was only folklore or only a story, but Atlantis really was a place that was powerful in its own right. It had modern technology. They used energy. They used crystals. Can we talk a little bit about what you know about Atlantis and why Atlantis fell?
Yes, that is such a good question. Thank you, Christy, because I think we can only understand really the pyramids and the Egyptian history and spirituality if we go back and start from the beginning, which is Atlantis. And in my book, Sacred Mysticism of Egypt, chapter 2 is about Atlantis, because I felt I couldn't really speak about Egypt without going through what happened in Atlantis. So what I remember from Atlantis, I remember that this very beautiful civilization that was in the beginning. Atlantis also had a golden time. It was exquisite. It was based on light, on beauty, on enlightened government, because it was the spiritual teachers, a bit like Tibet used to be. It was the spiritual teachers who were the leaders as well. And it was a wonderful place, and they kind of, kept themselves to themselves, but they started to expand. In the beginning, the expansion was very respectful of the other places on the earth. There were other human tribes that were maybe more indigenous, that were living simpler lives. Well, the Atlantean life was actually quite, I would say, sophisticated. They had beautiful, what I saw was beautiful fabrics, lovely temples on top of the hills, wonderful, volcanic mountains that were filled with fruit trees and so much abundance. Everything was beautiful, symmetrically done. The architecture was absolutely amazing. It was an exquisite place. But even in that beautiful place, that the souls who incarnated there, they had this aim to work for the light and evolve. Even if that in that beautiful place, the ego was present. And what happened at some point was the some of the people started to say, well, we don't want these spiritual teachers to tell us what to do. We have to figure that out ourselves. Why should we have to train as a priest to take decisions about our life? And what happened was there was this separation. The priests and the teachers lived in this very high vibrational plane. They were not interested really what was happening, there. They tried to preserve the vibration so much and that energy, because they didn't want to lose the opportunity to use the ascension portal, which means that they don't have to go through death, that they could actually ascend, transform their body into light, and live, whenever it was the right time to go. So they didn't want to lose their vibration. They were in this very almost like exquisite environment doing spiritual work. And they were trying to say to people, this is what you can do as well. This is what you can train to do. But it was taking so long, and people are impatient. So when people started rebelling, the teacher said, oh, you want this, you want to govern yourselves, fine, we leave, we will leave, and you do whatever you like. And that was a mistake, because it was like living this technology, this amazing technology, this amazing knowledge to, young children who don't know what they're doing, or teenagers, even worse. They know
Yeah.
everything. So what happens then in Atlantis is that we have that time of corruption. So before, they're very respectful of other places on the earth, and then they start to expand and want to domineer other people. They want to take over, and then there is the destruction. And the ancient Egyptians talk about the destruction of Atlantis, and they say that the people thought, we are gods. We don't need to look after the sacred. We don't need to, respect the life. We are the best. We can do everything we want. The earth is there to serve us instead of us serving life. And that was the big mistake. That was a huge mistake, because they came to that point where they were starting to do DNA experiments. They were starting, we used to have what I have seen from Atlantis before is that we used to have the ability to self-heal. We didn't, we didn't get all these illnesses that are there today. Our body had that ability to self-regenerate and self-heal. And we used to live for much longer than we live now. So
Yeah.
I saw that the people, because they were using the etheric energy of the earth and sky, this life force energy that is throughout our whole universe, and they were in line with that they could self-heal. So, and everything could blossom, like the indigenous people still know, if you ask the earth will provide. Even in arid ground, they can have crops growing. because there is that connection. So they were so connected. But when you lose that connection and you go into the ego, then you go into the lack, and then you take from another person rather, or another tribe, rather than looking at your own beautiful resources.
It when I read the story of Atlantis, it really made me feel like we're in the midst of reliving that in our modern times, where we're on the brink of like having the most technology we've ever had, and we're also on the brink of blowing ourselves up again, of not being able to um we are like children. We're petty, we let our egos, we're greedy, we're violent. And in my journey of doing shows and talking to people, from what I understand, the human species, it's not the first time we've ruined things on this planet. It's not the first time that we've blown ourselves up. Like, it feels like we're on repeat. And when I read about Atlantis, we're on repeat, is what I kept on saying to myself, like, oh, yeah, we've been here before. This is exactly what we're doing right now, is we're completely destroying our environment, completely disregarding other people because of their beliefs, because of the whatever, because they're not like you. And it's sad that our egos, which seems to be the culprit and most of our troubles here, is that we don't pay attention to the egoic mind, that it's not going to lead us to always the best places, and that you have to come from your a heart-centered way of being in order to overcome your egoic mind that is always going to want attention or want more or be dissatisfied or feel lack or um so let's talk about how Atlantis, it falls. It's they basically, the Mother Earth says, I've had enough, number one, and they blow themselves up. It
Yeah.
sinks, and some people escape. How does this translate into this time that you speak about in your book, that you have yourself experienced in prior lives, of this golden time where um, I'll let you take it from there, my friend.
Yes, so basically, yes, the Atlanteans blow themselves up. The ancient Egyptians say it's Sekhmet, the destroyer, that comes and obliterates everything. But the people, the teachers, have already seen this is happening. There was this knowledge that we are going to, come to that point that we are going to lose everything. And they are moving out of Atlantis to the places where the Atlanteans had built places of power, key places of power, where that they could go. And the teachers live, and one of these places they had already built was Egypt. So in Egypt, they had built the pyramids already. It was a place for some Atlanteans that had moved there. They were like, it was an outpost of that empire. And those who survive go back, and they go to Egypt as well as other places, and they think, now we have to continue and rebuild our life and heal from this huge karma, learn from what happened before, and start again. And they think, how can we safeguard that knowledge that we have, both the spiritual knowledge and the technology? But we have to do it in a way that we don't go back to, making it accessible to people who do not have the consciousness to use this technology. So they create this ancient mystery school, and they do it through the temple work. So they build huge temples, huge cities that are sacred places of very high vibration. One of these amazing places that is still there, we can go to the ruins, is the Saqqara necropolis in Egypt. So if you go there, and just by walking in that place, the first thing that most people feel is a sense of peace, a sense of very deep peace. And they say, oh, my mind has stopped talking. There's that if we start realizing, as I finally have this quiet mind, and that when we have a quiet mind, then the information from our soul starts feeding in. We start to listening to ourselves instead of the conditioning. So I have in Sacred Mysticism of Egypt, in the third part, the esoterica part, there are practices where I take people to that portal that is in Saqqara to experience what is it for them, how does the energy feel, and be in that peace, and do the work. As well, there are ceremonies that help you connect really with that portal.
Yep.
So the ancient Egyptians created that temple, um, almost like a university. The temple is a university, is the administration, everything happens there. So it means that if you are, let's say, an engineer, first you have to go through the teaching of the light. Come from your heart. If you are a midwife, come from your heart. If you are a builder, you come from your heart. Whatever, if you are an official, you have to learn about the rule of mud, meaning divine justice creates divine order. So if we want to live in a place that is good, that we live in flow with life, that we experience divine order in our life, and therefore we are living in a sacred way, then we have to do our bit and be true and just in our life.
Yeah, you talk about there's so many things that are in this book that are such great wisdom that you speak of, and the way in which you talk about living the way of the living light. Can you d- describe what exactly living in the living light means? I guess you just did, coming from the heart, but this was the overall mantra back in these ancient times, where everybody did live in a much more cohesive, um, deep love and respect for one another, that somehow we can't seem to get to today. So what is the path of the living light?
So basically, it means that when you live from your wise heart, through being just and true, that's what the words that they use is be just and true. So what that means is that then you are in this training school that is life. Earthly life is a training school for the soul, and it's quite an advanced school. It's not for the faint-hearted, and that's why life is bittersweet. So life is going to test you and say, okay, are you still going to be in your divine heart? Are you going to listen to your inner wisdom instead of saying, okay, nobody will know, I'll just do this now? But what happens, they said, is that your heart, your consciousness experiences everything. So even if you try and say, I'll do something that is unjust, but I'll forget about it, there is some part of you that knows, and that creates a heaviness. In Tibetan, they call this the karma. It is like, it is that heaviness, and your heart becomes heavy. And what happens, they say, in order for you to live, to become the living light, to become the enlightened consciousness, then your heart needs to be as light as a feather. And the way to do that is through unconditional love. It's not through judgment. It's not that you've sinned and you're a bad person now and you're doomed. Not at all. It's like through unconditional love to really examine, why did I do that? It doesn't really serve me, because maybe I was afraid. Maybe because I wanted something so badly and I was afraid it would never happen. Maybe I never thought about it because it becomes a habit after a while. Maybe I was asleep and not awake. So they were helping people to become, first of all, aware, and nature was a big part of that. So they had the very last nature, that is the Nile, the both banks of the Nile. And then they have the opposite of that, which is the desert. And in the desert, there are no plants, is like completely empty. So the fullness and the emptiness, a great place for the soul to experience life and death, activity and quietness. So this was Egypt was an amazing place for spiritual awakening. And the living light basically means that your inner light, the soul that we are, that incredible consciousness, is so much present in your body that you are coming from that. It's radiating out of you. So you are the walking light. You are living. You're not like a spirit. Once we die, we all are the light. But you are here in the body, and you are the spirit in the body, the enlightened spirit in the body. And that takes a lot of dedication and a lot of work, and there is no magic wand. That's why it takes us lifetimes, and maybe that's why we come back again. And yeah, from ancient Egypt, now we are sharing this work through the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, you also talk about how multi-dimensional our souls or our spirits. We have different facets of who we are. Can we talk a little bit about what the Ka is and the Kahibit, the Ib? What are these facets of our personality that we're completely unaware of?
Yes, so what the ancient Egyptians did was to really look at the spirit and say, want to understand, we have to understand that it's not just the earthly consciousness, but there is so much more of us. And they try to define what is a human being. They tried to define that. So first they said, okay, you have the earthly consciousness. They call that the personality, or the shadow self. Sometimes we call that, but is the part of us that is aware of earthly life, that reacts, that acts, that makes the decisions, and that is the Kai bit. But they said it's not you, just your physical body and what is there. There is another you. There is the etheric you, the etheric being. That's what they call the Ka. They call it also the double. They say when you incarnate, there are, your consciousness creates the human body. So we choose our body, we make it the way it is because the consciousness chooses that. And then the earthly personality develops in reaction to what you live through life. So that's the Kai bit. And the Ka at the same time is the etheric double who really looks at what the Kai bit is doing. So the etheric double is, like you could say, an observer, observes, is so wise because the etheric double knows everything about all our lifetimes and everything else. And the etheric double merges with the personality when we sleep at night. The etheric double also can be anywhere. So we are talking here together, and our etheric double can be somewhere else doing the work that our soul knows what to do. So maybe sometimes, for example, some of people who study with me say that other people have dreams of me, that I'm doing these things, I'm doing healing, or I'm helping a relative die, and I don't know how to do these things. They say, I have no idea, but they see me, doing healing on them. And they tell me, but I haven't trained yet how to do that. So that means that the Ka has all the skills that this soul has learned over many lifetimes and remembers and knows, while the personality here is playing catch up. So the Ka is influencing the personality and saying, you need to go and learn how to do healing. I already know, but you need to remember that. And it's something that they learn later in life, while a part of them has already been doing it.
It's so fascinating. Would you say the Ka is what we would call the higher self? You know how a lot of people say that you have a higher self. Would you say that that's the equivalent in spiritual terms?
Yeah, I would say the Ka could be like what we call the higher self. And there's another aspect of the Ka that is really important, is that the Ka works beyond space, as I said, can go anywhere, but also beyond time. So that means that, for example, we have these, how many hours in the day, but the car could do what could take us months in 1 hour or 2 hours. And I can give you an example of that if you wish.
Sure.
So at some point, it's a few years ago, one of my friends, he's a psychic medium, and he took me to a spiritualist church. He was going on the platform, and another medium came and said, "You have a guide, a spirit guide, who is a nun, and she wants to show you what you do when you sleep at night." And she said, would you like that? And of course I said yes. So I fell asleep for 2 nights. I was so tired because I was really experiencing, you know, I was asleep, but I wasn't asleep. I was awake in my sleep. So, I was a spirit guide for different people. And what would I do for like 2 hours of that night, for example, being a spirit guide, would have taken months. So I was really advising somebody in their everyday life. One case, for example, there was somebody who was trying to give up drugs, and I was like their spirit guide, trying to take him away from the cartel where he was buying the drugs, and try to influence him and live a good life, and somehow save him, connect with his intuition. And all these days I was seeing in my dream that I was going working with him took 2 months of his life, and it was 2 hours of my time. So therefore, it's like time is very irrelevant for the car. It's very fluid, and it's fascinating when you think about that.
It is fascinating. You talk about in the book that we're living in a time of set, and can you explain to me exactly this concept of what set is? What era are we in? And we're on the cusp in between two different eras, Haran and Set. And what is that? Where are we at in the world?
Yes, so we have different eras. We talked about the golden time and how beautiful that was, and that lasted thousands of years because we lived in that wonderful time of connection. But the time of Set starts with a primordial karma where a brother kills the brother. So it's when there is a killing of the brother. Now we're all brothers and sisters. So when we see all this primordial killing and all these wars and all these people killing each other, um, it's actually that is the primordial karma repeating itself, and this is what we have to heal because we are one. We are really one. So we are killing, another being. We are actually dismembering ourselves. So that is the start of the time of Set, and Osiris, or Osir is the Egyptian name. He is the time of the heart. That is the time of when we were connected. And when Set, his twin brother, kills him to take over the throne, using sort of manipulation and bribing others and creating followers and all of that. When that happens, we start this time of corruption. So the time of Set is a very hard time. And it doesn't last as long as the golden times, because what happens now is that we are start to awaken and say the way we live our life does not make us happy. Is once more we're destroying the earth. We're not ourselves. We're not in our power. We have given our power to all sorts of other things. And we need to find ourselves. So people start to seek the knowledge and wisdom of the spiritual teachings. And the time of Horus, or Horan in the Egyptian name, is the time where the spirit starts to awaken, and we are seeking that connection. In order to awaken, we have to dive deep into our spirit. And that is a difficult thing because now Horan is battling with Set, because Set, the conditioning, the corruption, the mind, I mean the conditioned mind, is part of us. So we try to do the right thing, we try to follow a spiritual path, but the conditioning pulls us back, saying, no, watch TV, oh, don't care about that. You have other things to do. And basically we never have time for spiritual work. Even for 5 minutes is very difficult to find during the day. So there is this inner battle. There is this inner battle because the conditioning is so strong, and the conditioning is not something that is part, well, I said it's part of us, the conditioned mind, but it's not actually really the case. We are the enlightened spirit. The conditioning is something that exists only in this earthly reality. It's like a sort of cloud around us that has clouded our mind, so we cannot focus on that straight connection to the divine that we have and to the earth. So we are a bit out of alignment. This cloud has clouded our vision. And this cloud of the conditioning is part of the earth, is something outside of us, but it has so much power because it has been fed by our thoughts, by our actions, collectively and individually.
Yeah.
So Set is very strong, is very strong.
It appears to be in full force these days, that's for sure. I liken that to my own spiritual path has kind of allowed me to step out of what I would call the 3D matrix, where you do start to understand how programmed we are and how there seems to be a desire to keep us distracted, even if it's from keeping us poor, so we have to work 3 jobs and we don't have time, or keeping us scrolling on our phone so we're distracted from our own inner thoughts or inner world. And um, you I'm at the point in my journey where every single time I'm listening to something on the TV or the phone or the computer or whatever I'm listening to or watching, I absolutely put a filter on my brain and I ask myself, what is this trying to get me to do, get me to say, get me to feel? And if it's trying to get me to hate somebody, if it's trying to get me to feel outraged, if it's trying to get me to feel sad, if it's trying to get me to do anything negative, I pretty much disregard it at this point because I do feel like a lot of this outrage we feel in the greater global consciousness these days is on purpose, and they want us to be outraged, they want us to be distracted, they want us to lose our humanity from one another. And being in this world of set, it is all about, it feels to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's all kind of about feeding your own ego and not being able to tap into um your inner world. Don't you think? Doesn't it? That's what it feels like to me when I read your book.
Absolutely, Christy. Absolutely. What happens is basically we are influenced by this psychic soup that is all around us, and that's why it's so important to work spiritually to cleanse ourselves and raise our vibration, so that we create a sanctuary. And you're saying, my life now is a sanctuary where I'm not affected by all these things. I make a decision that this does not serve me. I can feel how things influence me in a negative way. And it's the same about people, friends, etc. When we go a step on the spiritual path, our life can become smaller because all these friends that we had, people, that who were part of our lives, we don't resonate with them anymore. And there's
Yes.
nothing bad or good. We just, we have evolved to be somebody else, and there is no meeting anymore. So this is like a normal process of evolution. And Seth can also be a very harsh teacher, because in the bigger picture, Seth is a teacher. And and it helps Horan step up. So Horan has to find his power, find his resources to say, I have to fight to clear my crown chakra. So in our world, we learn through two main ways. One is through love. We learn through love, but we also learn through suffering, because if we suffer something, then we say, okay, that was not good for me. Like you say, I can see this film, I think, oh, that's not good for me. I know now that I'm not going to go there. That doesn't serve me. And until we develop that awareness, we keep in the suffering, in the outrage, in the fear. And then at some point, something in us wakes up and says, no more. And then that is the cusp, that is the changing point. And that is a very important point that takes you out of the sleep. And the ancient Egyptians said that we are like sometimes like sleeping dead. We're just like going around our life, our everyday needs and everything else, material life, and we're like eating, sleeping, and what are we doing? And they said, you're like a sleeping dead in this, they called it the inert state. And in their initiations, what they did was to call back the person's spirit, to say, resurrect yourself. It was a path of resurrection out of this sleeping dead state into the awakened state. So they had these beautiful ceremonies of resurrection into the spirit.
I love that. The other thing that when I was reading about the golden times of ancient Egypt is um it was much more about your own etheric energy, oneness, self empowerment, um, and it wasn't about looking to your exterior world to find peace, happiness, or who you are. It's all about looking within. And I noticed you don't ever bring up the Bible or the mainstream God, and I'm curious as to how you feel about the Bible and mainstream Christianity or Judaism or whatever. Pick your religion. There's a lot of them. How do you resonate with that? What do you think about mainstream religion these days?
Somebody said, I can't remember, it was years ago, said to me, all religions have one thing in common. It's all about love. It's about love. And I said, when I look at the religions the way they are today, it's, yes, there might be that element of love, and love your neighbor and love the other person. But what I see in practice is so much control and so much man-made rules, so much of that. So when I was a child, I could really feel the presence of God. And I was born in the Greek Orthodox religion, my family, in the Greek Orthodox. And I could really feel and see the angels. I could feel the presence. I could feel the presence of God around me. I could feel Mother Mary. Mother Mary was my spirit guide. She would talk to me. And as a child, I didn't have any barriers. I just loved that energy. And I was quite young, and I asked the priest, because I loved that energy, not the dogma. And I said, I would like you to tell me, why can't women be priests? Because in Greece, they're not allowed. Women cannot be priests. And he said to me, women cannot be priests because they are dirty. Yeah. And I just knew. And he looked down at that point because he knew that was a lie.
Yeah,
And I was just like a
yeah,
girl, telling a girl, women are dirty. And I knew that was man-made. That was the patriarchy. Even as a little
yeah.
girl, I knew that.
It does seem like the patriarchy's time. It's time for that to fall, along with I would say mainstream religion in general. I think part of the reason why we have some of the problems that we have is because men have been ruling the world for an entirely too long. And if the feminine divine would rise up. And I'm not saying we need to um be higher than the masculine energy, but it needs to have balance. There needs to be balance between we were never supposed to be subservient to men. I don't care what any man out there says. We were never ever supposed to be subservient to men. I don't care. It has always been with the earth, with everything, that balance is the key to harmony, to peace, to all good things. And there needs to be a balance of masculine and feminine energy that are actually working together to make everything better: the environment, politics, our lives, our our spiritual teachings, all of it. So interesting, very interesting. um
Absolutely, absolutely.
What one of the things that I want to talk about, which I also thought was fascinating, are spiritual attachments. It's something that's coming up on my show a lot. Is past life regressionists talk about it, paranormal people talk about it. That um, our souls are living bodies that when we die, depending on what your own belief system is, you could get caught down here as a ghost. So, can we talk about what's a spiritual attachment, how they happen, and what are the possibilities that exist out there for more people than we think to have this problem? Because as I was reading about it, I was like, this makes a lot of sense to me of why people do such crazy things that they would not normally do. And maybe it is mental unwellness, but some of it could be like a super negative energy attached to somebody who finally they break. But tell us about spiritual attachments. What do you know?
So there are many different spiritual attachments, but some could be lost souls. So lost souls are souls, people who have died, but they have not passed to the light for many reasons. One of the reasons could be the passing was traumatic. So they passed in a way and they felt shaken. They're out of their body. Now they are in their etheric body. So they see themselves as being alive because in their spirit eyes, they see a complete being, but nobody can hear them, nobody can speak to them, and so they start following their the living relatives. They live in their house, they go there, they attach to the relatives. They might be causing a lot of problems because if they died with an illness, that illness, the energy of that illness is not healed. They themselves feel still in pain, even though they have no body. It's like phantom limb pain. They feel as if they are still ill. They still have the pain from that illness. But that illness, also the energy of that, because it's not healed, can start to affect the living relatives or the people they are attached to. There are also other type of lost souls who died in suicide in a very traumatic circumstances. So not something that was chosen, right? Like thought very uh, before they did it, like euthanasia. It could be something like a suicide uh, due to huge trauma that I cannot be here, and then their energy is pulling other people to suicide. They are like making other people really mentally ill and pulling them to towards death. So so this is not just my belief. I also, when I went to Nepal and worked with some shamans there, they had exactly the same belief, and they say this is very dangerous. If we find some soul like that in a village, we do many days of ceremony to try and move them on, because they will pull other people to suicide or die of accident all of a sudden. So
I feel like this is a bigger problem that no, like I I just feel like there's more of that going on than we would like to believe. Our belief systems that lives in the mainstream, would laugh at something like that or disregard it or think it's impossible. They're I used to be the same way. Like, I'm coming from a perspective. I was an atheist my whole life. I didn't believe any of that. And the more I learn about stuff like this, the more I'm convinced that it happens more regularly than we would ever think think that it does. There's so much mental unwellness out there. I can't help but think that there's more negative energy attaching to people than what you would think. It's fascinating. Um, I keep hearing from people I talk to on podcasts I watch or whatever about Gnosticism and the fact that there is something called archons, and earth is a spiritual trap, and we keep reincarnating here because when we die we go into the light, but it's not a light of good. It's a light that keeps us um, slaves on this planet getting reincarnated over and over again, and that there's something called luge, which is an energy that's negative that these archons feed off of, which is why earth is a slave planet. And I wanted to ask you that because number one, you're clairvoyant, you have lots of ability to get in touch with beings from other dimensions. Is there any truth to this? Like, have you heard of this theory? Is this a thing? What is your thoughts on this Gnosticism belief that there's archons that make us reincarnate and you have to die a specific way and ask them if they're of God when you do die or you get trapped in that light again? This is what I'm hearing. I want to know your professional opinion.
Okay, so what I have experienced is that there is the most wonderful light of unconditional love coming to us on the earth right now from enlightened beings and from beings of light, from also star beings of light. There are also the bad guys, if you like, if you want to call them that. But they are, as there's light, there is dark. So what happens, what I have seen that may be explaining something like that is when somebody is doing black magic, curses, works with lower entities to cause harm, manipulates the etheric energies. I have seen that these people, when they die, the same beings they invoked, like for example, I invoke the light, but they invoke this darkness to do harm on other people or control others. These beings are there for them when they die. They see these entities and they carry, like when we invoke the light, it flows through our current body and it elevates our consciousness. But when somebody invokes the dark, that's what happens to them. So they are filled with energy, heavy energy that is very painful, that can cause aches and pains and all sorts of things. And it happens especially when they try and do spiritual work. So maybe they've done this in a past life and now they want to do the right thing and they want to evolve. The moment they try to do the work, they have all these horrible pains because this lower vibration that they work with is trying to stop them move on. And it takes a lot of work. It takes so much work to really get rid of this, of these energies that they had worked with. And also it takes a lot of spiritual work to cut all the attachments. They need a really powerful ally from a being of light to cut the attachment to the entity that they used to invoke and work with. So they see that, so these people are trapped, yes, and they need help. But so that is why people sometimes don't understand. They think, oh, if I don't like somebody, I send them a curse or whatever, thinking, no, this is the worst thing you can do, because the etheric realm is so much more powerful than the physical realm. If you go and punch somebody, is one thing, but if you send them a curse, it's 10 times worse. You are really, really carrying a very heavy energy and karma there. And so I have helped people who had done lots of things in a past life. They knew that. They were very afraid. They had a lot of unexplainable pains and illnesses. And we worked and cleared that. Over time, it takes so much time, but they did it. And that was, not many people have the capacity to say, yes, I will do this, because it is frightening when you meditate to see this entity coming to get you and thinking, what is this? But then realizing this is what I've done before. And to overcome this takes time, but with support. With support, you can do this, because the divine is unconditional love. I have no doubt about that. I think that there is a way for us to exit the wheel of reincarnation, which is through becoming our light. We're beings of light. We're so powerful. And I also have seen in the bigger picture, for this time, so many souls want to come and live a life on earth, any life, even the worst life, the poor life. Say, I need to be here on earth at this time because it's the cusp, is the change of eras. This is where the diamond is being grinded, it's being polished. And therefore, this is a huge time of evolution of the soul. And I have hope that we will not blow ourselves up and that we will make it.
I don't think I think there's beings out there that are going to intervene if we try to blow ourselves up again. I really do. I think that there's benevolent beings out there that are not going to let us kill ourselves again, and they're going to intervene and say, "Hey, look, dodos, that's not what we do, and this is who you are." And you know, w- we'll see what happens. This book does make you think about getting on your own path and opening up and becoming initiate. And if people read this book, um, what is your best advice for people to start stepping on their own path of the living light? What do you suggest that they do? Do you have a website where you kind of take people through this, or like how can people start this process if it pulls them? It kind of pulled me a little. I'm not gonna lie.
That's great, Christy. So the website is called the ICE School of Holistic Health.com. And you'll find so much there, so much there. It's very rich, and there's just so much I do. It's me and my colleague Fee Sutherland. We work, the two of us. You will see so many programs, and we just the two of us, but somehow we get the energy to share all this wonderful work. So for the ancient Egyptian work, so there is the introduction to the Egyptian mysteries. There are 3 webinars coming up that are going to be live September, October, November. If you miss them, you can also, do them again. They will be recorded. And there I give you some information about how these mysteries were taking place. There is a bit of history. There's, obviously you can feel the energy, and there is a spiritual practice to also work with that. And if that resonates with people, the big step to become an initiate is a step where you say, okay, I'm stepping onto this path, I'm receiving the initiation. And then that focus is much more on spiritual practice and ceremony rather than the history. So if you want to know more about the ancient Egyptian mysteries from a mental perspective and spiritual too, but also the history, then the webinars are better. But if you want to really practice, then the spiritual path of ISIS is the first course that is in April 2026 online, or you can come to Glasgow in March. It's also in March in person. And or
I would love to go to Glasgow.
Well, welcome. You're very, very welcome. You're very welcome. So that would be amazing. That would be amazing. So that path is my. Isis said, "I'm not really interested in telling you a lot about the history because that has happened." She does use some references because we have maybe lived through that time, and she said that was the last time that these teachings were shared in their entirety. So after Atlantis, Egypt held the teachings together in the mystery school. Other places also have these teachings in some form, but she says the complete teachings, the last time they were together was in ancient Egypt. So there are some references, but the main thing she's interested in is to help us evolve into the light and do the work. So that's what she shares. And that path you can walk in take your time, or faster, or not, or whatever. It's your own pace. And we have a community as well. We meet once a month once people get initiated and they do the work and they want to continue. We meet once a month and we practice together online. And now and then, ISIS invites us to go to Egypt and do the spiritual work in the temples and sacred spaces. So every pilgrimage that I have been able to facilitate had been absolutely magical. We did amazing work. And we were very lucky to be able to do that because officially it's not allowed, but there's always a way. And that was great. I'm so grateful.
Do you think that this information is being withheld purposefully? That we're not, you know, I've heard of other mystery schools out there. I don't know if they all teach the same type of knowledge. But do you feel like this information is being held from us? Because when you read the book, the way in which they viewed life, the way in which they viewed us, it just made so much more sense to me than anything else I've ever read about what life is, or even how we do life now. I would say most people aren't truly satisfied with the way our system, our society is set up. It's set up for a few people to do really well and everybody else just kind of struggles along
Yeah.
and is a victim to life, not a active participant of life almost. So, what are your thoughts on that? Are we being held back from understanding who we are purposefully?
Definitely. And that you can see in Egypt. If you go to Egypt, you will hear all sorts of myths. And then if you look with even you with your common sense, you will see that a lot of the stories that were being fed from school times, that the pyramids are some sort of tombs that people build with copper tools, and that they were slaves or ignorant people. There is no way this building has been built by anybody than engineers that absolutely knew their job. Each stone is exactly placed. I mean, there are places in the pyramid that you can say, we could not even do it today. You know, even with our modern tools, how can they put that granite there? It's just and polish it in that way. And there are so many questions, and there are people who go out there and they record all that, and they show that, look, this is a drill, this is a hole made by a drill, that you can see it is and everything is being ignored. There are
Yeah.
people who go and say that there are all these tunnels underneath, you know, and they're finding these tunnels in radars, and then they go and excavate, and there are videos out there that show you all these tunnels that they say they don't exist. So the things that I've seen in the book are starting to come out, because now I think people are waking up, and more of that will come out. There will be more information, and it will start to become mainstream. You know, maybe 10, 20 years ago, nobody could speak about that. They would say, you're crazy. Still, people might say you're crazy, but it starts. Somebody said to me, you know, this is starting to become mainstream now, because people are understanding this. The first time I went to Egypt, I had an Egyptologist with me, and I said, show me and my group in the Cairo Museum all the things that cannot be explained by, you know, our current theories, etc., about ancient Egyptians. And we went through so many artifacts, and it's in plain sight, hidden in plain sight, that this was a very, very advanced civilization that existed in ancient times before the timeline that we have. It's in
Yeah.
plain sight, but
Yep.
we cannot see it because our conditioning has clouded our mind.
Yep. I agree. And I also agree that we are on the brink of a great awakening on this planet. I think the more we see everything around us crumble as far as our institutions, and I think that you know, post COVID, a lot of people had their own awakening where they got locked up into their homes and they started doing a lot more thinking because they were off work. And I think it is it's becoming more mainstream to talk about things like this. So I know that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this show is to get people to kind of open their mind and let go of their programming and to start understanding how vulnerable everybody is to programming. But I do think there is a slow burn to everybody starting to understand that we are so much more than what our five senses can pick up, and that there is a greater purpose for us being here, and that there's so much more to our existence than what we're told. So I'm very happy that you're around, and I'm going to check out your school. And it just, guys, go pick up the book and read it, because it really does make sense, a lot more sense than what we're told. It resonated with me for sure. um I will make sure and put your book in the show notes, but please come back on this show. I would love to have you again to get more in depth on what the nature of our existence truly is here on this plane.
Thank you so much, Christy. I would love to come back. And thank you so much for inviting me, for all the questions, for actually reading the book. And it's really great because I do a lot of these podcasts and sharing my work, but so many people have not read the book, and it does make such a huge difference to speak to you, who has such an understanding of the book, and you felt it in your heart. and
Yes.
and, and I have to say that the way Isis gave me this book, when I channeled this book, it was like a transmission of light, and she said this would
Yes.
be a transmission of light for anybody reading it. It will meet people where they are. And thank you so much for all that you said, and for engaging with the book. Thank you so much.
Let's keep in contact. I'm going to follow you in your journey. It's fascinating. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We will see you next week for another episode of Fate, from Atheism to Enlightenment. Pick up this book. I'm telling you. Journey well, everyone. Bye bye. And that is a wrap on this episode of Fate, from Atheism to Enlightenment. I want to thank Fotula Foteini Adrimi for coming on the show. Woo, that's a name. She's amazing. I hope she continues to touch as many people as possible. I will say you really do have to read the book. This podcast didn't even scratch the surface as to what is in the book as far as knowledge and how reality is built, how we really could be living our lives, how easily our egoic minds take control, and I think it leads to what it's happening now. It seems like humanity is on this cycle of corruption. They forget who they are, that we are spiritual beings of light here to expand, learn, and grow our consciousness. Um, it seems like once we throw that out, we start leaning into our egos of feeling the desire to be superior to each other. Humans love to feel like they're better than one another. We love it. It's our ego mind. We lean into that hardcore. Um, greed. Greed starts surfacing. That's our egoic mind, like being always wanting more, never feeling satiated, never feeling like it's happy, always feeling like there's something else out there that's going to give us that sense of wholeness, of feeling happy. So we chase things with materialism. That seems to be a cycle that we keep doing. Um, Violence. We're kind of barbaric. It's just the level of violence that is in our world, that's in our culture, is also something else that I find to be um, driven by ego. Because if you start to understand that we're all connected, that we are etheric energy light beings, that we're all source. When you start understanding that, you start falling away from this need, this over competition, this over materialism, this over consumerism, you just, you start finding happiness within. I'm not even interested in watching television or watching movies anymore. It doesn't interest me. Um, my own inner world interests me. The multi dimensional nature of our reality interests me. Finding my soul path and getting on it and expanding my consciousness, that interests me. But the pettiness and the selfie culture and the consumerism, materialism doesn't really interest me. I don't understand the pull there. But definitely should read this book. You're definitely going to feel like you have just read something that made sense to you as to how we should be living and how we should be paying attention to our programming and how detrimental it is for us as far as keeping us from figuring out who we are. And we are all the spark of the divine. We are all eternal beings of light. And we are just so caught up in this 3D society mainstream programming that we can't snap out of it. So I don't know, gang. I'm definitely want to have her back on the show. I definitely think that I'm gonna look up her institute online and see if I can't start taking some classes or something, because it did resonate with me. It did make sense to me. I did have a aha, this makes sense. And I understand why this information is being kept from us. And I do think there is a big awakening happening. And I think there's so many light workers down here right now trying to awaken and put as many people on their path as possible. And I'm going to start having more of those people on the show. I'm getting people reaching out to me saying I have a story, and I'd love to tell your story on your show, and I am delighted and excited to present people that are having their own spiritual experiences, and they're here trying to awaken as many people as possible. And I think I'm going to have some great shows coming up for you. And thank you for sticking with me. I love doing this show. I feel like I'm getting a degree in spiritualism, because it's not like I focus on one thing. I have been trying to put as many topics out there as possible, from energy healing to manifestation to shamanism to Egyptian mysticism. It's all about expanding and learning and growing and understanding the reality that we're swimming in. And it's not the reality that they taught us. It's something different. It's something more. I am definitely a much more spiritual person that tries to make decisions from a heart center, not from an egoic mind. And I'm hoping that other people are starting to live in that zone as well and start adopting their own spiritual practices, because I don't think it's just one way. I think as long as you're coming from a place of love, that's the most important part of the picture. Everything else is do what resonates with you and do no harm. Alrighty, gang. With that, we will see you next week on Fate, from Atheism to Enlightenment. And welcome to your fate, everyone. I'll see you next week. Bye.